Welcome back to the Paddle and Fin Podcast Network. We're brought to you by Yak Gadget. For all your fine kayak fishing accessories, go to yakgadget.com. Pelican cases, coolers, and lighting. Go to pelican.com. And the 153 Bait Company. For all your hard and soft bait needs, go to the 153anglers.com. Now let's get this show started.
Welcome back to the Bass Fishing for Noobs segment here on the Paddle and Fin podcast. As you can hear, we're giving the new intros a try, so that is a work in progress, but I hope you guys like how that's going so far. I am the host of Bass Fishing for Noobs, Sean Lavery, and I'd like to welcome all of our listeners. Tonight, we have a guest with us who's going to talk about a species of bass that I have yet to fish for. It's definitely a bucket list species for me. And I look forward to, at some point, traveling to a place where I can attempt to catch one of these. But to introduce that, I'd like to welcome Garrett Pate onto the show. So I'll add him in here. Hi, Garrett. How are you, sir?
Hey, good. How about yourself, man? I'm doing great.
I'm doing pretty good. A Thursday night, getting closer to the weekend finally. So I'll be much happier tomorrow evening about this time. So.
Yeah, unfortunately for me, I have to work this weekend, so
Ah.
day work week.
Yeah, that stinks. I'm sorry to hear that. Well, I hope you still get some time to get out, maybe. So maybe sneak out now and then. I just came off call last week, and I have 2 more weeks, and then I'm on call for 2 weeks in a row. So just picking up a week for a vacation for my friends. I'm not looking forward to that, but I'm living the dream right now until I get to that point. So,
Yeah.
So for the folks who aren't familiar with you, why don't you let the people know who you are, where you're from, and kind of how you got into fishing and bass, fishing if you fish from a kayak, or where you like to fish, how you like to fish, that kind of thing.
Okay. Well, my name is Garrett Pate. I live out in Georgia. I'm originally from California. Grew up there till I was about 12 years old, and moved to Georgia. My dad was looking for better work. He's a truck driver. We moved out here, and that's kind of my introduction into freshwater fishing. When I lived in California when I was younger, my dad used to take us to Newport Beach, the pier. We would do cod fishing off the bank or something like that. Really didn't do freshwater fishing when I was really that young. It wasn't until I got to Georgia and my dad started taking me bass fishing. We would just walk the bank, um, just like any other normal kids would do. Just find a little pond somewhere and go fishing. And back then, I was really trying to find my way. I did actually a little more pan fishing than I did bass fishing. My dad was usually walking around the lake doing sight fishing, looking for bass on bed right on the bank, and me and my brothers were playing with like little fly fishing flies. We would tie it to some lightweight, light tackle, and throw those out there and let the bluegill just tear them up. So
There you go.
every now and then we would jig for a crappie or something like that. But if we were lucky, we would catch a little small bass just messing around, and that kind of piqued my interest into fishing. My older brother actually got me into aquarium fishing. Not that fishing, aquarium fish.
Okay, I was gonna say.
We raised aquarium fish growing up, and they're mainly cichlids, South American cichlids and African cichlids. So we were really deep into that. Had all the books, we studied them, understood all the different types and different species of African and South American cichlids, understanding their water content, the alkalinity levels of the water, stuff like that. We built habitats for them, all that stuff kids, we like to do. And I actually learned a lot about fishing doing that.
I
And
was
I
just gonna
didn't
say.
realize it. Yeah, I didn't realize it till a lot later on that doing that as a kid helped me understand fish behavior. And if you don't know fish behavior, you're gonna have a hard time catching fish. So fast forward to 2007, I've been in the Army roughly 4 years. I joined the Army in 2004, and I was went to Iraq in 2006. Came home on leave, and my wife introduced me to a guy named John, who was a family friend. His wife actually worked for my wife's father. He owned a plumbing company for a long time, and when I met with him, we got to talking about fishing, and I was telling him how I wanted to go up to one of our local lakes, Lake Lanier, and do some striped bass fishing. He was like, "Hey man, have you ever thought about kayak fishing?" And I was like, "No, I've not really thought about it. Never even crossed my mind that was even a thing. Um, so he takes me in the garage, and he has this red kayak sitting in there. It was the first model of Jackson Coosa. Drew Gregory actually fished with him.
Oh
I
wow.
know they know each other. It was way back. I'm talking like 2007 was kind of when Drew Gregory was doing this thing, river bassing, and kind of trying to figure out the first sit on top kayaks and things like that. Because I think at the time he was fishing out of like a Pelican, um, one of those ocean kayaks or something. It was an older kayak, wasn't his clip in seat, old school, and that's what they were using in the rivers. And he was showing me pictures of all these shoal bass that he was catching, and I was just like mesmerized by this fish because I had never heard of a shoal bass, and I lived in Georgia, and I was like, the only thing I knew of was largemouth and spotted bass. And I was
Right.
like, so what's the deal with these shoal bass? He was like, it's the funnest fish to catch. You'll never want to catch anything else. We chase them in the rivers, and I'm just like kind of like okay, okay. But at the time, I was so engulfed with what I was doing at the time. I mean, we were in the middle of fighting war, so I was actually home on leave for 2 weeks and going back to Iraq to finish my deployment. So finished the deployment, came home. Nothing really ever developed for a long time, surprisingly. Just got caught up with life, kids, marriage, army
Mm.
life.
I was going to say adjusting back to
Right,
non-wartime life. I'm sure
right,
that's a
right.
challenge. Yeah.
Right. And we were still training at the time. I mean, this is going all the way up until 2018 when I
Okay.
started dipping my toe in the and getting a kayak. Um, I was really just not into walking around doing banks. I was like, you know what, this bank fishing stuff is not going to cut it, interested anymore. I mean, that's what I was doing. I was literally going to local lakes with one or two rods and kept just fishing from a dock, fishing from a bank, walking through briar bushes and everything else. So
Yep.
I went on a training mission to what we call JRTC, Joint Readiness Training Center, and it's where they put you in the field for 30 days and you train up like you're on a deployment, fighting a notional enemy. And during that time, I was on a detail that was kind of boring. And me and a buddy of mine, my buddy Steven, he's actually another Team New Canoe member of ours. But we were sitting there in this building just doing this detail, and we had a lot of downtime. So I did have good internet access being there because the mouse gear that they use bounce off wireless signals. So we had good cell phone service we were at, and somehow I come across Robert Fields field trips videos, and I just started watching them and was like, this is freaking awesome. Like, what have I been missing the last 10, 12 years? Like, this is what I should have been doing this entire time. And it kind of just hit me like a ton of bricks. And it literally every day for almost 30 days, that's what I watched was kayak fishing videos. So the wheel was turning already. I kind of told my buddy Steven, I was like, hey man, I'm getting a kayak when I get home. I will find a way to be on the water. So I was doing a lot of research from there. Got home in May time frame of that year, um, and um, was doing a lot of like digging on Facebook through the marketplace, just trying to
Hmm.
find a kayak. I was looking at sun dolphins and all kinds of craziness, not really knowing exactly what I wanted to do. I didn't really have any direction. I didn't have anybody to go to be like, hey, these are the better kayaks to buy. So I found Headwaters Kayak in Dan Arbuckle. I found one of his videos. He had $1,000 kayaks video, and I knew I didn't want to spend a whole bunch of money because I knew if I didn't like it, it'd be something I could probably get out of. And there were
Right.
several boats lined up there, and I was like, okay, I'll pick one of these boats for $1,000. And I actually found a dealer that actually sold them, which was Westbrook Supply with Fletch.
Yep.
And kayak was a Big Fish 105, and that I got that around June. Started fishing in July, hitting some reservoirs, and never looked back from there. And of course, I've been through three or four kayaks since then. So, um, shoal bass for me was not long after that first kayak purchase. So, we went down the river for the first time in November of 2018. And the river we went down was the Oakmulgee River, which is a plentiful habitat for shoal bass in the state of Georgia. So, that's pretty much how I got into kayak fishing and where I am today. Um, I've kind of
Do,
done both.
go ahead. I said I heard you say you're on Team New Canoe, so that's pretty cool. What boat are you fishing out of right now?
I'm in an unlimited now. Um,
Okay.
I started with a Flint. Realized I'm 6 foot one, 220, 230 pounds, give or take whatever time of the year you catch me in. uh, so that I noticed that boat just felt a little bit too small. Very stable, For even with me in there, I could stand up in that boat and fish. It just wasn't as comfortable as I wanted to be. So I paddled the F12 before, and I paddled the F10. I ended up going towards the F10 because I like skinny water. So
Hmm.
the F10, it was wide enough. It carried all my gear. I could stand up on a dime. I was like, okay, this is a good boat for me to be in the river. Little harder to paddle upstream with it, but it gets the job done. If you're a skilled paddler, you can don't let people scare you away from saying, "Hey, a F10 it doesn't go upstream well, it doesn't paddle well. It'll go up some pretty good heavy current." So you'll be a little tired, but you'll get there. But yeah, I had an F10 for a while. And then when the Unlimited came out, I naturally upgraded to the Unlimited, knowing that it was a good river boat. I needed something with some more length to it, a little faster. So it made sense for me to go that direction.
Okay, and are you mostly paddling, or do you pedal or motor?
So I do have a pivot drive on it that I
Okay.
take off from time to time, whether depending on the situation I'm fishing in. So I have that. I had that on the F10 as well. I just converted it over to the Unlimited when I got my Unlimited. Made a couple parts changes, and it's on my Unlimited now. So I paddle and I do that, and I'm thinking about dipping my toe into the motors a little bit. That's more to follow on that.
Okay, okay. No, I'm kind of in a similar boat. I started out with a Wilderness System Starpin 100 and jumped to a Kusa HD, and then I wanted to pedal. So I now right now I'm in a Hobie Outback,
Mm,
but
congrats.
I am in the process of looking for a riverboat because I miss that part of the Kusa because the Kusa HD was awesome in the rivers.
Yeah, that's a great riverboat.
And if my wife wouldn't have made me trade it in so that I could buy the Hobie, I probably would definitely still have it. But so I'm looking to kind of get back into that. I've been checking out the Unlimited. I'm kind of waiting for Drew Gregory to come out with his newest Crescent. I know there's one in the works that he designed, so
Right.
I'm trying to be patient and wait for that one. My patience is slowly wearing away though, so the Unlimited is looking more and more appealing every day. But
I will say this about New Canoe: if you don't want things in your way, they won't be there. And that's what I love
yeah,
about New. Things can get chaotic on current, and that's the one less thing I have to worry about. It's a rod getting hung up on something not being in position while I'm sitting in current, maybe fighting the fish. I'm kind of have free reign around me, almost like an F-16 cockpit. And people don't know about fighter planes is that F-16 is designed where that pilot sits up at a point where he can see 360 degrees around him, unlike in other planes where you're kind of sitting down in it and you have a limited visibility. Kind of the way I look at the new canoe is that I have ability to do things 360 degrees around me with unimpeded. So keep that in mind.
I had a chance to check out the new canoes down when we had our Dale Hollow meetup. Jimmy Skinner had his down there, so I got to check out that, and that one was pretty sweet. And I really liked the open layout for that exact reason. I like my Outback. It seems like everything on there is where I need it to be, but there's definitely times when I'm on the river and moving current that I wish I didn't have as much stuff right around me
So
because you're.
you were up at Dale Hollow?
I was at Dale Hollow last year for the Paddle and Fin meetup. Not this year at the tournament
Uh,
thing that they had, but last year in the fall we had a meetup down there for the Paddle and Fin crew, and so that was my first time down there. Probably the farthest I had driven from Pennsylvania to fish, especially. So I it was tough fishing when we were down there too, kind of out of character from what I understand for Dale Hollow. We had like a little tournament and most of us struggled to find fish.
you
I think
know, that
uh,
might be something that might be going into character because when we were down there for the tournament, it was terrible fishing conditions. I mean, like you said, it was tough sledding to find any fish. I
that's
mean,
kind of how it was when we were there. And I mean, I managed to catch I think three, and none of them measured. And but I was actually one of the more productive ones from the guys who were fishing. Even the people who won didn't hit the five fish limit. I think
wow.
the person who won had three, and I think the top three had three, and then it went down from there. So it was definitely tough fishing, and it kind of surprised me because I was actually looking forward fishing someplace other than the places that I've always fished, because I kind of, wear out my local bodies of water. I kind of know them inside and out because I fish them so much, and I was kind of looking forward to trying someplace new. And they, we heard lots of great stories about the smallmouth there, and I was really looking forward to it. But it just, like I said, and like you said, it was definitely tough fishing. So
Yeah, we don't have a lot of smallmouth in the state of Georgia. There's a couple tributaries that hold them way up north, but that's really all we have. We have to go into Tennessee and some other bodies of water just to get on smallmouth. So
okay,
searching for that. We were searching for a good smallmouth bite for that tournament, and had very high expectations for Del Hollow, it being the home of the champion, the world record freaking smallmouth at the time. So I was
right.
like, this is a win-win situation. We're going to catch something that's going to be brown. So that happened. So I'll
Yeah,
be
no,
back.
I was the same way, and I am looking forward to going back. I just wish it wasn't 13 and a half hours away. That was a long drive, but
Yeah.
um, so speaking of shoal bass, that's what we'd like to talk about tonight. And again, I have never fished for them. Never knew of where they are in the country. I've definitely heard of them. I When you and I were talking a little bit, you were saying that if you can catch smallmouth, the tactics are very similar for shoal bass. So that excites me because smallmouth fishing is probably replaced largemouth fishing for me as my favorite. Because they just fight harder than any other fish I've ever caught. And like I've caught a 15-inch smallmouth that fights harder than a 20-inch largemouth. Largemouth, when I catch them, they're kind of like, ah, crap, you got me. They do fight a little bit, but nothing like smallmouth. And the Susquehanna River, I happen to luckily live only 15 minutes from there, so I have a huge smallmouth factory in my backyard. And pound for pound, I think they're the strongest fish, that I've ever fished for. So,
Likewise, I actually live 15 minutes from the Okmulgee River, which is our shoal bass factory for me. I can dip out of here and go put in the river down there and be on shoal bass pretty much immediately. So shoal bass, yes, you were like I was telling you earlier that if you fish for smallmouth in current, you've already completed half the battle in shoal bass. They're very very similar. Um, there are some differences. I will say that. Um, you can fish them like any other family, black bass family. Same baits, you'll use the same stuff to catch them. Just depends on what they're wanting that day. But I will say that there have been days on the river where I feel like I was fishing two different species. So one day you go out there and it seems like they're just a aggressive fish that just wants to get everything and you have no problem catching them. And then there's days you go out there and you're like, okay, where are they at? And I've never really understood that. And patterning these fish can sometimes, it's as easy as it should be, it can be very difficult because they travel great distances. And unlike any other fish, Steve Salmons, the Auburn biologist who studies shoal bass down there in South Georgia or South Alabama, coming into Georgia a lot, he does a lot of studies, and I've listened to a lot of his work and his case studies on shoal bass and what he's found out about them. And they've tagged some of these fish that have traveled over 200 miles.
wow.
They've come up and down river systems that far just to spawn. It almost reminds me of a striped bass that will go way up a river during its spawning season and then maybe go back out to a big lake or maybe even the ocean. So there's that to think about. And matter of fact, I was just listening to one of his, Drew Gregory actually did a special podcast with him not long ago
I was
where
going to
they
say,
went
that name sound familiar, and now that as soon as you said that, I was like, yep, I remember listening to that.
the one where he went over every black bass species. And
Yep.
he talked about, in that story, he told about that one shoal bass they tagged that went from the top of Upper Flint River all the way down through Lake Seminole, through the lake, through the locks of the dam, down the dam into another river basin, and then somehow got back up.
Crazy.
Unexplainable stuff. So
Right.
I've heard stories from some of these biologists that during heavy flooding, these fish will go up falls if they can.
Wow.
So there's really nothing that can stop this fish from its traveling. And if they were determined to go somewhere, it seems like they're starting to find them in other places of the country that they probably shouldn't be found. So there's some definitely illegal introduction still happening with the fish, unfortunately. As much as I love the shoal bass, I don't want that fish to go ruin somebody else's fishery. Because it can do it. It can definitely have a huge impact on another fishery. I don't know about it as devastating as spotted bass, but they will hybridize with other black bass, so that's an issue.
Right.
And the Okmulgee River in particular was an introduction as well, but it was done by the DNR with them not knowing any better in the 70s. That I don't know what made them do that. The salmon's talked about they put those fish in the Okmulgee River, which was mainly largemouth and Altamaha bass, another rare black bass species only in the Altamaha River Basin. Um, that it's really hurt that population. So you have a lot of hybriding going on in the Okmulgee River with shoal bass, spotted bass, and these Altamaha bass. And Altamaha bass are almost not a thing anymore. So that is it's been an issue, but I can't really complain that much because I love catching them all. I mean, it doesn't matter. I don't care if it's a hybrid. I love chasing them all. They're very mean fish, and like you said, pound for pound. And I've caught smallmouth in Tennessee before. Um, yeah, it's hard to beat a shoal bass. Now I can tell you that if I had to leave the state of Georgia and move, it would be to a smallmouth fishery
Okay.
because that's the closest I can ever get to fishing for a shoal bass again.
And
So
how many places are shoal bass found throughout the country? Is it mostly
it's just in Georgia, in the Apicola River Basin, which is the Chattahoochee River, the Flint River, Chipola River in Florida. So that little corridor in that southwest corner of Georgia, southeast corner of Alabama, northwest corner of Florida, it
okay?
makes up that basin. Lake Seminole, Lake Blackshear, uh, down the Chattahoochee runs through um, West Point Lake. So that river basin down there is where you find them and in the tributaries.
Interesting.
You will find them all the way up the full stretch of the Chattahoochee River, all the way up in the North Georgia. They're up there in the Hiwassee River. Um, they're all up through anywhere the Chattahoochee runs through its tributaries. Um,
Okay.
Now the Old Mulgee River, since they were introduced there in the 70s, they now are in the Altamaha River Basin, which also the Altamaha River Basin actually connects with the Oconee River, and that makes up the Altamaha River when those two rivers touches. So
Okay.
they've been known to come down the Okmulgee, turn the corner, and go back up the Oconee, and all the way down the Altamaha River down to the south end of Georgia. So they have to have rocks. They have to have current. They will not live in a lake. Um, they will pass through lakes, but you will not find them in lakes.
Interesting.
This this fish, the only way it thrives is in current. Um,
Okay.
its original name, which I have a hard time saying, um, but it describes it as a fish that likes to live in whitewater in the falls. So, and I've
Okay.
literally caught them in whitewater. Um,
Wow.
so I can't say that I've ever caught a smallmouth in whitewater. You may have, um, but
I I've caught it in fast moving current and ripples, but I wouldn't consider what I caught them in whitewater. It was something I had to be anchored to be sitting there, and definitely moving quick, rapid movement or water. But I wouldn't say it would like it's not something I would be afraid of going through in my kayak. So let's put it that way.
yeah,
So
I've literally caught them in rapids in the
wow.
whitewater,
Okay.
um, 15 inches, 16 inches, and I've even seen some bigger ones in that kind of water. I had once maybe try to blow up on a top water cutting through or something like that. Where it seems like the smallmouth like to hang more towards the eddy line,
Hmm.
shoal bass kind of spread themselves off through all that. They're in the
Okay.
push water, they're in the white water, they're in the above the shoal in the push water up there, they're in the tail waters. They're where you find they're found where every fish can be found in a river and plus in the center of the river. So a lot of our rivers, as rocky as they are, they have a lot of these underwater big rock shoals that run down the center of the river. So you could be in the very middle of the river catching shoal bass and and that's what makes them hard to pattern. Is like
Hmm.
you can find them on wood, you're going to find them on rock, you're going to find them in shoals, you're going to find them in slack water. I mean, that's the crazy part about it is figuring out where they're at that day or that time of year, depending on where they're at, and pressure will run them off. And that's another thing I've noticed here this year is that the pressure on my local river has made this fish a little more scarce. Now, when you're talking about tournaments, and we just had two in the last month on the Okmulgee River, people are going to find a bigger fish. It's just going to happen. But if it
Right.
was just you and me out there one day, we're not covering that kind of water, so it may be a little bit harder for us to find a 20-inch shoal bass, 21, swimming around. You might run into a lot of 12s, 15s. You might catch a couple big spots, a big largemouth, but it's just a little harder to do. But when you have 40 boats on one stretch of river fishing a tournament, somebody's bound to run into the good fish if they're there. Um, but here lately, it's just seemed like there's been so much pressure on the river. I'm having to go to other places that I haven't really focused on to see where they're going. And I do look at a lot of smallmouth uh, patterns to see if the
Hmm.
shoal bass are kind of following the same pattern. I follow some guys out of North Alabama and Huntsville who fish for smallmouth. They fly fish for smallmouth up there and out of the Tennessee River basins. And as he was saying that in their rivers, these smallmouth run up the tributaries in the heat of the summer, and they come out of that main river. Um, so that has me like scratching my head, like, okay, should I go look for shoal bass in some of the smaller creeks and tributaries when it gets really hot and that water level comes down because a lot of these rivers are dammed up. So they'll generate from time to time and raise the current up, which will bring the fish back up closer. But when
Right.
that's river is constantly low, where are these fish going? Because you're not going to find your big shoal bass hanging in heavy current when it's hot.
Hmm.
And that's like I've experienced that. I go to a certain set of shoals that I like to fish, where there's usually good quality fish, and they're just not there. You run into a lot of the 12, 13, 14, 15 inchers, and where are the 16, 17, 18-inch plus fish at? And you can't find them. So I have a train of thought like maybe these bigger fish, their whole thing is survival and conserving energy. So maybe these bigger ones are moving into the slacker water. That all they need is a little bit of current. So what's going to stop them from moving somewhere where they can conserve more energy close enough to a shoal where if they need to feed up or get more oxygen, they're going more towards that moving water where it's a little more oxygenated.
Especially
But
if they're willing to travel, like you
right,
say. I mean,
and that,
they'll move to where they feel comfortable, and if they have to go, a long way, that's what they do. I imagine. So
right,
I can
and
see that
that's
where that would be make targeting or finding patterns pretty tough. I mean, there's definitely times where I think I'll have a smallmouth pattern dialed in, and then I'll go like this. Just happened to me last night. I had been crushing it on top water after the sun went down behind the horizon. I could throw a popper and pretty much slay them. And then last night, I couldn't get a topwater bite after the sun broke the horizon to save my life. I think I caught like maybe one or two, whereas it was almost every other cast. And they were, prior to last night, they were, big fish. That's when I was catching my 15, 16, 17s. Whereas, before the sun kind of went down, it was, the little 12s and, the little dinks. But for whatever reason, last night, that pattern completely went away. And I'm not sure why, because it was just there. Like I went out twice last week. Both times followed that same pattern. It was lights out. And then last night, for whatever reason, just didn't play out. So I imagine with a shoal bass that will travel far, that would make that even more difficult. I'd be second guessing myself left and right.
right. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, like Drew Gregory has really cracked the code on shoal bass. There's a couple other guys I know that are pretty good at it too. I'm not saying I'm the do all say all, but I've been very successful catching good amount of shoal bass. But I follow and study Drew Gregory like a specimen because he does know how to catch these fish. He does know how to pattern. He's been doing it for a very long time. And I had the opportunity to run it into Drew on my river one day. I actually got a picture with him a couple of years ago, and he was
That's
out there.
awesome.
He was out there making the magic happen. I'm not even gonna lie. Like I was impressed watching because he didn't. We were a shoal above him, and he was coming up a shoal, and we were in some pretty heavy early spring current, and he was in his original Akusa with another guy we know, and I watched him pull at least three 18 plus inch shoal bass out right in front of me in a matter
Wow.
of like in a span of about 10 minutes. I watched him, and I'm talking about muddy stained water. Like I'm like, how is he doing this? Like, I've been out here all day and caught 4 fish. I talked to the guy that was fishing with him. He was like, man, he's been putting the hammer on him all day long. And I'm like, man, he's wearing him out. So yeah, I listened to. I actually went back early on and listened to a lot of his early podcasts that he was doing with the river bass and the hooked on wild water stuff he was doing with Mr. Kenneth Noisewater.
Yep.
And he broke down a lot of stuff, and it started making sense to me. It was like putting a puzzle together. He started really making sense of things, and I was experiencing these things every time I went to the river, and I started getting that puzzle put together too. And once I did that, it was like, okay, got it. Now it's time to figure out where these fish are. Now I got to refine the fish. Once I find them, I can break it down. That's been the hard part going into the year in and year out. I know I can catch them in the early spring. Those big females are out there feeding. I mean, you get in that stained water with a chatterbait, and you can put the hammer on some big females in the early spring. It's just when you start getting into that June, July, August time frame that it's hard to find. It's hard to get quality. I can catch a bunch of little ones, but and I fish a certain way. So I mean, I power fish for the most part. But here lately, I've been doing what I like to call power finesse. And every cast I make is a purposeful cast. That cast has purpose. It's a targeted cast for a specific reason. I don't really fan cast, just kind of cover water. I know a lot of people like to use that to try to find fish. But when I'm fishing shoals for shoal bass, I'm targeting certain things. I'm looking for the fish to react a certain way to what I'm doing. And that goes back to me raising fish as a kid. Because a lot of the African cichlids I raised liked rocky formations.
Interesting.
And they're very aggressive, just like shoal bass. And shoal bass have the tendency just to hit something just out of it being aggressive. They're not even hungry. But they see it. That's a problem. They're going to eat it. So that's kind of the way I look at them. And I was, this kind of hit me one day. I was walking through a pretty large shoal complex on my river. And I was looking at the rock formations. I was standing in about thigh-high water, and I was looking at these row of shoals just shooting out, and it looked like rows, like almost like theater seating. And there was in between there was like patches of this grass and milfoil in there, and I'm watching. I can see the shoal bass transversing through the rocks, and I'm like, okay, so that's very interesting to me because I was thinking about raising fish, and I was like, they used to do the same stuff in my aquarium. Like they weren't in current, but they would stay in these rocks. And if I dropped bait in the tank and it started to float and they're hiding back in one of those rocks, and as soon as that bait got in front of that rock, shoot out real quick, hit it, and go back in. Shoal bass are doing the exact same thing. Exact same thing. I spent one day in May standing on a rock in the middle of the river for 45 minutes trying to catch one fish. I'm literally standing over the fish's head. It was a female. I'm standing on the rock that she's under, and I have a TRD, and I'm literally watching her come out of the rock, mouth the bait, and I'm just trying to get a good hook set and surprise her. And she gave me 45 minutes of her time before I actually caught her. And it was only a 16-inch female, but I mean, it's just one of those things. I was like, once I started to understand what they were doing, I knew I could stand on rocks and do that. I was like, okay, I can go to each one of these pools and probably just drag a crawfish or something right down in there and entice these fish to come out. Sometimes there were 3 or 4 stacked up in one rock. And it was crazy. I mean, once I figured that out, that's how I just like to go fish for them now. It was, I go get like a 3-inch minnow with a ball head jig, something like it. If I need to set it on the bottom, I can set it on the bottom and work it, or I can drag it past the rocks. And top water is just bar none for shoal bass. Like if you're not throwing top water against shoal bass, you're missing out. I mean, you could throw a whopper plopper and drag it over these shoals, and you can see them. You can see the shadows just shooting out, coming out. They'll try to grab it real quick. And that's what I like about a shoal bass. They'll grab it real quick and go back in. They won't even look at it. They don't even care what it is. It's just, we're going to grab it, take it back in this rock, and eat and devour it. And they'll come out and just tear up whopper ploppers, buzz baits, and whatever you can drag through there. So I kind of sit parallel to the shoals, and I'll just go up each column and get them to come in and out of there. So
Okay.
that's been really successful for me. And I know I can fish smallmouth the same way because I've done it.
I was going to
Um,
say it. I have used patterns very similar to that for smallmouth and even trout. I remember sitting in a trout stream, kind of the same story. I saw one peek its head out from under a overhang of rock, kind of, and I sat there for half an hour just trying different ways of floating my bait down past that rock or trying to get it to stop right outside until I finally found a spot where he would come out and nail it. So that's cool. I mean, it has to be a good feeling and also neat just to watch a fish in its natural habitat, doing its thing. It's got to be a good learning experience, but also just cool to experience that. So,
yeah, it's. I've been here lately. I've been throwing flukes. Um, I'm not really a fluke kind of fisherman. I've thrown flukes before, just never really could find. I didn't have a lot of confidence in it. I had
hmm
more confidence throwing a swim bait or dragging a crawl or a jig. Um, but when I started throwing flukes, and I got to give a shout out to Blaine Upton on this because he actually talked about that was one of his favorite things to throw in a river on another podcast with Brian. And I started. I said, let me see what this is all about. Let me just actually dedicate some time to throwing a fluke. And I was throwing on a kill weighted hook. Um, and believe it or not, man, that fluke, I was lighting them up in some current on that fluke. I would throw it out there and let it kind of swirl down in the current and give it a couple jerks. And before you know it, they were on it. Like my line would just stiffen up in the current. I knew they were on it. And I was like, man, this actually works really well. So it's now
and
another tactic that I've thrown in the tool bag.
what kind of weight were you using? Because I've tried flukes before in the river and just didn't have a lot of feel for what was happening to it. Almost to the point, but I was doing mostly weightless, so that I was throwing a weightless fluke over top of like grass, hoping to kind of just sit on top of the grass, not actually get down in it. I was looking for more like a weedless kind of bait to use. But I kind of shied away from the current because every time I threw it in the current, it would just blow right through it and come right back to me.
So I'm throwing a 1/6 ounce kill weighted. Um, what is it? Oh my God, it's the new Z-Man hooks that has the keyboard.
Oh, yep, I know what you're talking about.
I've been throwing a 1/6 ounce with a Senate jerk shad, a Z-Man. Matter of fact, Brian Lattimore has a really good video on his setups for that, and that's kind of who I kind of mimic behind. And that setup has been really good. Like it doesn't sink straight to the bottom, but it holds in the water column a little better than a weightless one, where like you said, it gets blown around and kind of just loses its composure, and the fish kind of lose it. This one
hmm
drops; it slowly falls as the current's pushing it. It's still getting pushed around like crazy, but it has a kind of a wounded fish looking fall, and it's kind
Right.
of jerking going down, and it excites those fish. They'll come out. They don't even really look at it too long. It's there, and they'll grab it as I start to maybe try to get a cadence going. I've had them grab it, and I've even actually making really long casts where I can't even see the fluke, and I'm just jerk, pause, let it kind of swirl, and boom. Soon as it starts to make that fall again, they're on it. Um, so I've had a real good time using the flukes. And I know Drew, and he was throwing a freaking a Magnum fluke. I mean,
hmm
that thing was massive,
Yeah.
and he throws it in whitewater, and these big shoal bass will just you'll see his line pop, and they'll be on it. I mean, that's the thing about shoal bass is their mouth is not small like a smallmouth or a spot. Their mouth is very comparable to a largemouth. Not as big, but picture I share it with you. I sent
Yep.
that one to show people, their mouth is they try to bite off more than they can probably chew, but they'll take a much larger bait. You catch them on big swim baits too. They'll definitely get on big swim baits. So they're not shy about what they're gonna go eat. It doesn't take small baits to get you can get them on big stuff.
Well, let's see. I was just going to see if I can share my screen, but I shared the wrong window. Let me see here. Let me remove that one. I was going to ask you about size, how comparable their uh, their size was, because to me, I always pictured them as smaller, but 20 inch is not going to be smaller. So
Yeah.
it sounds like they're very comparable to smallies and largemouth.
Oh yeah, you can get them. 6 pounders. The record's 8 pounds, 3 ounces, I believe it is.
Okay.
And that
Whoops. I keep on sharing the wrong screen. Sorry. Let me close that one. That way I won't share it anymore. So I'm sorry, how big did you say?
you get six. You can catch 6 pounders. A really big one would be a 7 pounder. 8 pounds is the record. 8 pounds and 3 ounces or 4 ounces, like something like that.
There we go. Now we got it.
Right there was about 19.
19.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right. I mean, just from the mouth size, it does, it does look like more of a largemouth type mouth. Oh, and we have actually the other picture almost even shows that better. The other picture you sent me, let me share that real quick. For sure. Share. See if I can pick the right one. There we go. Yeah. So if you're looking at that, you can definitely tell, that's a pretty good sized mouth right there. Definitely not a smally mouth for sure.
Right. Yeah, they'll tear it up.
That's awesome. I definitely am going to have to make a trip. I'm a Braves fan. I was just talking to Gene Jensen about my Braves and coming down to Georgia. Gene told me to come down and visit him, but while I'm down there, I might have to check out the Shoalies for sure.
Yeah, man,
That
come on
sounds like
down.
a lot of fun.
Got some places to stay. My buddy Clay stays right up the street from me as well. He was on with Brian a few weeks ago talking about veterans kayak fishing, and
Hmm.
the invitation's open. We got you. Come on down. We can
That
put you on.
I'm gonna have to do that here sometime. I gotta rebuild my vacation up a little bit, but that is definitely going to be a bucket list for me. Maybe who knows? Maybe we can talk the Paddle and Fin guys into doing a meetup down there.
Yeah, that'd be
You know,
great. That'd
you
be
guys,
great.
they're not too far from a bunch of the guys. You know, Jimmy's down there, Dan Perry. They're all kind of down in that neck of the woods. It's a bit of a hike for us northern guys, but definitely sounds like it'd be worth it. Be a good meetup spot. So.
So you mean you got a few rivers in Georgia you can come to? I mean, the main river that you're going to want to find shoal bass in is going to be the Flint. That's the natural home. That's where they're from. That's the fish that fish is from that river. That's the native species of that river is shoal bass.
Okay.
So Flint River, the Chattahoochee, and the Okmulgee.
Now, the tournaments that you guys do down there, are they just pretty much all black bass species, or do they focus on any in particular?
It's all black bass. You can have a
Okay.
bag with 3 different species in it, sometimes 4.
Okay. Interesting.
You
Have
also have
you
the
caught?
Tuskegee River.
I was going to say, have you caught one of the? What was the other bass that you said the shoals are kind of wiping out there a little bit?
Georgia has a ton of black bass species people really don't know about. We have, besides the other red eyes, you have Bartram's bass, Chattahoochee bass. You got, we have our own Georgia smallmouth in the Savannah River. You got the Altamaha bass. I
That's the
mean,
one. Yeah.
you got the Swanee bass down in South Georgia in the swamps. I mean, we have a ton of different fish and black bass species right here in our state that you can chase.
That's
So
awesome.
we got a big bass. We got the bass slam here where you can go and try to catch all the different species. You get an angler award for that.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, we have them all down here. I mean, if you go to Alabama, there's even more. You got different. You got the Cabana bass. You got the Tallapoosa bass. You got the Coosa Alabama bass. And then you got the Black Warrior bass. There are all kinds of black bass. You can literally come down to between Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina and just kind of take a tour of the black bass species because
That's
they're all.
awesome. I remember listening to that show you're talking about that Drew did, where they went over, and I had no clue that there was all those different types of bass and strains, and that was a super interesting show. So anybody, if you're curious, it's on Hooked on Wild Waters, and it's probably like 6 months back now, I think at this point, or something like that, where
It
he
was
had that guy
about
on.
4 months ago. He had Steve
Uh,
Salmons on. It's not hard to find on any of the iTunes. You can find Hooked on Wild Water. So
Yes, and for
very,
those of
very
you guys
informative.
who don't know, Drew actually just joined Paddle and Fin for our tournament recap show, and he's also in doing that. Then he's going to kind of focus his own podcast back more on the kind of river bassing kind of deal. So he was super excited about that. So definitely check him out here on Paddle and Fin, but also check out his other podcasts. So,
Yeah, I'm gonna send you another picture.
all right. Let me see here. I will go back. Well, Garrett's looking for that picture. Garrett, how many? What's your tournament experience been like? I know Brian told me to bust your chops a little bit for skipping out on his or on the tournament last weekend, but what's your tournament experience been like?
I've done a few. I've done some local tournaments here with some of our local clubs. I did our first Bass State Championship tournament this past fall. I like tournaments, but I'm not sure if tournaments are for me in this aspect that certain other people are doing it, man. You know, it's I enjoy doing tournaments, but I also found that I don't enjoy my catches as much when I'm tournament fishing. I mean,
Okay, no,
I
I
like
definitely feel you there.
I like going to places like Dale Hollow and getting on a new body of water. That's always fun, and I'll always like to do those kind of tournaments. But as far as breaking myself every weekend to go hit a tournament is kind of not what I really enjoy doing. I enjoy the skinny water shoal bass and black bass species fishing. That's kind of my wheelhouse and what I like to do. Um,
Okay,
because you know it's not just about just going and putting a kayak in the water and going to fish and say, "Oh, I'm kayak fishing." It's an adventure,
right.
um, and that's what does it for me is the adventure part of it. Um, it's going to catch shoal bass. I've told Brian this. It's not for the weak of the faint-hearted. It's typically some work. And I'm not going to say a little bit of work, a lot of work involved in going to catch shoal bass.
Okay,
You're gonna be tired. Um, you're gonna go into some water that you're not comfortable going in, and you're gonna see some scenery that you're just gonna be just awed about. I mean, there's places on the water that you would never see unless you go and work for it.
right. I know Drew talks a lot about that too. You know, getting to back to those waters that nobody will put in the work to get to, but that what a difference that makes. You know, and I feel you with the tournament stuff. The thing I like about tournaments is the camaraderie more than anything else, and getting to fish waters that I normally wouldn't fish because I might not make the trip unless I'm going to go fish a tournament there, and the competition is kind of like the least thing for me. You know, I not that I'm not competitive at times. I definitely have a streak of that in me, but um, I definitely enjoy more just fishing with friends and getting to meet new people, getting to fish new waters, and like you said, the experience and coming back with a story, you know, to me is almost more important than what was your bag or where did you finish? You know that's kind of secondary for me. That's not the part of the experience that drives it for me. So let me share the picture you just sent me. We'll show these guys pretty good looking group of kayak fishermen. That's a pretty good group of anglers right there. Look at that. So that's cool. So Drew's in a Akusa there. It looks like, right? And who's the other gentleman there with you? Oh, did I lose you? Oh, let me put you back on there. Did you get muted, Garrett? I can't hear you all of a sudden. Let me stop sharing that screen and see if that brings you back. You still there? I somehow lost my audio on you. If you drop out and come back in, that might work. Sometimes that fixes our audio problems. Bear with us, folks. Garrett's just trying to hop back in here. We had a pretty nice picture there of him and Drew Gregory and one other gentleman. I don't know if that was Ken Morris or it didn't look like him to me, but once we'll see if Garrett gets back in here, who that was with him. Definitely, Georgia shoaly bass is going to be a target fish for me. Hopefully someday I will get down there. Maybe give Dan Perry and Jimmy Skinner a visit while I'm down in their neck of the woods. Make my way back to Dale Hollow while I'm somewhere down in that area. It's not super close to Georgia, but it's definitely in the vicinity. So we'll see what happens here. Oh, there we go. Let's add Garrett back in. Add to stream. Now I can hear you again, I think. Yep.
Cool.
So who was that in that picture? I know Drew Gregory and you, and who was the other gentleman?
So the other guy is Steven Reynolds. He's the other new canoe team member of mine, good buddy of mine. We both served in the Army together.
Okay. Thank you for their service, by the way. I forgot to say that earlier, but I appreciate that. So
yeah, we've been fishing together since 2018. Kind of, if you see me on the river, you're going to see him probably not far behind or somewhere in the river with me. So
okay,
I fish as a team. So
that's pretty cool. It's always nice to have someone to close that you can share that experience with. For sure. Try out new places together, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what like we were talking about. Like you were talking about Drew Gregg, you're talking about the adventure to get there. It's like when I first started fishing for shoal bass, I was going to what we call safe stretches, where it was really easy to access, and I realized I was missing out. I was like, I'm gonna have to go through some of this water I'm not comfortable going with to go catch some of these bigger fish or get to some of these better areas, and it was well worth the experience. Even if I flipped a kayak or something like that, it was still worth it. I mean, you're going to catch some fish in the scenery that you're just going to be like, wow, this is unbelievable. I can't believe this is actually in my state. Like I didn't know places like this existed, and you find them on rivers all the way around. I know my buddy Steven has actually been on the Susquehanna before. He was there a couple of years ago, and he said it was a little much. He went and rented a kayak from a local paddle shop just to go out there and see if he could catch something. And they did I guess they had a certain amount of time to get down to the next stop where they missed their pickup. But he got to go out there. He said that river is huge. He said, I guess the section they ran, I guess there's some big statue or something.
Yep.
He had some pictures, and I was like, yes, that river's massive. Like I can imagine. I was watching actually the Susquehanna smallmouth guide. I was watching some of his videos, and it's just like, wow, like the size of that river and the shoals that are in it is like, how is that even possible? But you guys have these huge schools of smallmouth going through there. That is insane. And like Steve Salmons was talking about that, those smallmouth were introduced in that river. And it seems like that would have been a natural habitat for them. So,
right.
It's crazy.
Yeah. If you can find a pack of them, I mean, it only takes, getting that pack one or two excited, and then you can catch almost every fish in the pack because they are that aggressive. And it's just, you want to just get the fish off your hook, get it back in there as quick as you can, just to see how many you can pull out of that spot. And yeah, but I was talking. I used to have my old co-host Ryan. He was from Tennessee, and one evening we were talking about river fishing, and I asked him, well, how wide is your river? And he's like, oh, at the widest point, it's 200 feet. And I was like, oh. And then in my mind, in that instant, it clicked how different it is. In my mind, whenever anybody talks about fishing a river, I think, oh, Susquehanna. But the Susquehanna is so much different than 90% of the rivers out there. So that, for some reason, a light bulb went off for me at that point, and I was like, oh, my river is completely different than your river. But there's definitely the same kind of habitat, it just magnified by 100 times.
Right.
So
river's massive compared to my rivers. I mean,
and
our wide, but it's not like that river. I mean, we got plenty of room. So it's just.
But at the same time, I would like to try some of those smaller ones, because I feel like one of the things that intimidated me the most when I first started fishing the river was just, where do I even start? And I've since learned kind of much better the kind of places and types of places that I want to target. But initially I was just like, holy cow, granted there's a lot of fish there, but you still have to be somewhat selective in where you fish, because there's a lot of water that doesn't hold as much fish.
Right.
So initially that was daunting, and that's why I'm like, I almost wanted to try. Like Dale Hollow was a little interest, or I was like, it's it's big and it winds and dines its way around, but it's definitely not Susquehanna big,
Right.
So that's why I was super excited to go there and try it. And then a little disappointed that it wasn't like I had heard, but still thankful it was beautiful, and it was just a cool setting, and plus to get to finally meet a bunch of the paddle and fin guys that I had talked to online so many times but never met in person. So it's really cool just to meet the rest of the guys. But yeah, so again, the adventure is 90% of it for me. And I love, one of the Drew's favorite things that he always talks about is finding the fish that might have never seen a lure before. Obviously they're going to be easier to catch, I would think, but still knowing that nobody has been back there to where those fish are. And I've I can't say I've been there a ton of different times, because I fish a lot of the same water more just because I have limited time, so I go to where I can in the time I have provided. But on the rare occasions that I do get to explore and adventure, I have found those fish way back in the middle of nowhere, that 90% of the people won't take the time or effort to make it back there. So
Right. That's the fun of it right there. Is I know not everybody's going to go do that. Not everybody's willing to go drag your kayak up multiple shoals, go up really heavy current, And we do that a lot just because I don't really particularly like float trips, because to me you're disturbing the fish before you even get to them.
mhm.
You're stirring up water, you're stirring up dirt. I mean, you're stirring up all kinds of stuff just trying to get down there. So a lot of times we'll go in below and go up and come up behind them and sneak up on them that way. That's typically how I like to chase any fish.
Okay.
That's what it was
Okay.
really important for me to get the right boat to say okay,
Right.
because and he does a great job, but after hours and hours of doing that, you're going to be pretty worn out, and that change
Oh
can
yeah.
be sport. But the limited has been pivotal here lately on rivers. I mean, it's been a breeze going up to some of these shoals and going through some of these shoals and traversing some of these shoals and getting to these fish. So it's been a really good boat. And like I said, I know you got a Kusa HD already as well. That's a great river boat as well. I mean, the nose design on that boat, it just kind of swoops water around it. You can get in some really good current in that boat, and fish hold your position almost without anchor. Um,
Right.
some of these boats do some amazing stuff in current. But
Right. I'd love to. I'm waiting for the new canoe dealer near me to actually get stock enough that I can go try one, because
yeah,
he every one he gets in is almost sold before he gets to even display it or put it out. So I've been waiting patiently to even just to try one, because I've heard the same
stability,
thing.
stability is unmatched to anything I've ever gotten in. Like, you don't even get to secondary stability in that boat. I can stand in the seat in that boat. Um,
Wow.
I can stand up in the river going down current in that boat. I mean, it
Wow.
is insane.
That's awesome. I am, like I said, super looking forward to trying that. Because even like I'm a smaller guy, and like I think my Outback has stupid stability. I almost feel like you'd have to be doing something pretty dumb to fall to flip that. And the Kusa HT was very similar. I could all but stand on the rail of that thing, and it wouldn't go the whole way over. Um, and so I can't even imagine what some of those boats, the wider boats and the even more stable boats are like. Because I mean, I already feel like I'm super stable in my boat, and I know that there's steps above that yet. So definitely something I'm looking forward to trying. So
Yeah, it's definitely. Yeah, you guys definitely need to come down here and dip your toes in our waters and come put your come put your shoal bass and your smallmouth up against shoal bass. Tell me what you think.
that sounds like a good plan.
Heard Drew's opinion. Um, I'm not gonna say it on this podcast, but I've heard his opinion on what he thinks is the better fighting fish. I'll let you be the judge of that.
Okay, all right. I'll have to message him too and just ask him, see what he says. But well, all right, Garrett.
To me, it's
We're Go ahead.
yeah. That's like to me, it's I particularly like the shoal bass over any other fish I've caught. Not
Okay.
saying I have a ton of experience with smallmouth. I've caught at least 8 or 10 of them when I was up in Tennessee a couple of years ago.
Hmm.
Nothing really huge, 16, 17, not any 17. Most of them were 16 and below, but they put up a good fight. It was hard to compare versus a shoal bass because comparatively, the shoal bass I've caught were typically, and the smaller ones were on a lot heavier current, so they fight a little bit harder. It seems like they're fighting harder. That current's also helping them, but the smallmouth I were catching are more of like just a good fast moving current. They put up a good fight, but it wasn't like I had to struggle with them to get them out. Now, not saying a 5 pound or 4 pound smallmouth is not going to give it to me. I'm sure they will. I've seen the stories and heard the stories about smallmouth and seen some of the videos, and I imagine that it has to be 1A and 1B with a shoal bass and the smallmouth.
I've had them. I've had smallies just run under my boat and spin me around like nobody's business. Like they weren't even trying, you know. But I can't imagine if you're talking about catching a shoal bass in rapids. Any fish that can live and hunt in rapids is going to be a strong fish. So
Extremely strong. I mean, you'll hook into a 14 and be like, "Oh, this is a good fish." I mean, when you set the hook, that fish was 6 pounds. I guarantee it. This fish is 14 inches. What's going on here? So
I felt so silly before. Same thing with smallmouth. I'm like, oh my gosh, this thing's huge. And then it comes up and I'm like, oh, okay, maybe not. But still a ton of fun. I know exactly what you're talking about. So, well, all right, dude, we hit the hour mark. That's usually what we try and hit. So, again, I'm totally psyched to give that a try. So, thank you for coming on. Do you have any uh, uh, sponsors you'd like to shout out, or social media that you're
few
sharing?
things, few people I like to talk about veterans kayak fishing for supporting me and me and Clay doing what we do for veterans. Westbrook Supply and Fletch for putting me in these great boats I've been in. Uh, all the guys at New Canoe, they're great, especially in the southeast region. I was just visiting with Eddie McCray today down at his shop. Everett, Blake have been great. All the guys on the team I've met have been great. Brian's great. Paddle and Finn. I mean, a few years ago, I kind of stumbled across you guys' podcast and kind of listened to it here and there in between other podcasts. But I've watched you guys grow into like this massive conglomerate of podcasts. It's awesome. Um, and Classic City Kayak Anglers and our kayak fishing team that I'm on. I mean, we're doing good things for the community and the kayak fishing community, and they've supported me and Coyote Outfitters, Westbrook Supply, Cedar Rock Outfitters. They're all great. Those are kind of my cornerstones. But yeah, that's kind of the kind of folks I like to be around. So, but great
Definitely.
guys and kayak anglers, and yeah,
It's a community like no other. I always tell people that, and I feel so silly that for the longest time I just didn't feel like I would fit in, and when I finally took a shot and gave it a chance, I was amazed at the number of people that are just genuinely nice people in the community and who will do just about anything they can for you. So definitely a community like no other, and you know a group I've come to call family. So definitely thankful for them.
yeah. And the biggest shout out goes out to my wife. She allows me to be this big kid and do this stuff. I mean, without her, I wouldn't be doing none of it. So
Cool. Cool. All right, man. Well, thanks again so much. Shout out to Brian Schiller too for hooking me up with you and
absolutely, yeah,
giving me the idea to, and let connecting us, because that was super helpful to me. And so definitely have to have you back on again sometime, man. And
yeah. Tell Brian he's got it coming.
you hear that, Brian?
He keeps talking. He
He's
got it coming.
he's throwing down, man. All right, Garrett. Well, thanks again to all the listeners. This has been the Bass Fishing for Noobs segment on the Paddle and Fin podcast, bringing you the techniques, the tricks, and the tips to help you rip more lips. Good night, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to another killer episode on Paddle and Fin. Don't forget to go check out our website at paddle_n_fin.com. Don't forget to check out the YouTube channel at Paddle and Fin. If you got a question, comment, want to hear from a future guest on a future episode, feel free to email us at paddle_n_fin@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Paddle and Fin on Facebook and Instagram. Shout out to our show supporters, Angler. The Angler button and app just makes for a better time on the water and creates a virtual logbook for every fishing outing out on the water. Shout out to Rocktown Adventures, located in northern Illinois, for all your kayaking, camping, and hiking needs. Shout out to Jigmasters Jigs. When in doubt, get the jig out. Go to jigmasters.com